Jerusalem. Like no other city on earth. Within its walls have occurred such great events in the history of mankind that to walk its street is to walk on hallowed ground. A city that reached its summit as a temporal power under Solomon nearly 1,000 years before Christ, but never the physical grandeur or glory of Greece or Rome, but it reached a pinnacle of spiritual significance never before known by any other city, and so it remains today. And they cast him out of the city, and they stoned Stephen, calling upon God and saying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And he kneeled down and cried with a loud voice, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Through the gates of St. Stephen in the east wall, where he was cast out and stoned, we enter into the holy city. To our left, just inside the city wall, on the center right side of the map, is a side of the Herodian Antonia fortress where Pontius Pilate made his headquarters. For Christians, the story of Jerusalem begins about 1,000 years before Christ, when King David's men, under his nephew Joab, crawled up the watercourse leading into the center of the city and captured it from its Jebusite defenders. David, who had already been ruling for 7 years over the united tribes of Israel, with Hebron as his capital, decided to move the capital to Jerusalem after its capture, and here he built himself a palace. He also bought the threshing floor on the neighboring hill called Mount Moriah, and here built an altar. It was the same Mount Moriah on which Abraham, many years earlier, had prepared to sacrifice Isaac, and on which Solomon, a few years later, was to build his temple. It is here that our journey begins. On Mount Moriah today stands the Dome of the Rock Mosque and the Haram al-Sharif, noble enclosure. This is a religious center of the Muslims of the Middle East and second only to Mecca in the Muslim world. The sanctuary covers 1/6 of the area within the walls of Jerusalem and part of the ancient wall marking the boundary on the south and east. The mosque was originally built in the year 691 AD by Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan. It remained as a mosque until the Crusaders in 1099 captured the city and converted it into a Christian church. However, less than 100 years later, following the city's surrender to Saladin, the Golden Cross came down and the crescent was put back to signal its return to the Muslim faith. Saladin completed its restoration toward the end of the 12th century, and with very minor changes throughout the centuries, it remains today just as it was in Saladin's time. The base of the exterior of the building is covered with gray-veined white marble, and the upper part with fine porcelain Kashan tiles inscribed in Arabic, and verses from the Koran written in interwoven characters of blue and white. There are two concentric rows of pillars and columns. The outer row supports the roof of the outer ambulatory, and the inner one the dome. The area within the two ambulatories is for prayer and affords room for approximately 3,000 people. The columns supporting the dome are of veined marble with gilded capitals, each with a different and individual style. No two are alike. The octagonal-shaped building has 7 windows on each of its sides. 40 of the windows, on the upper part just below the dome, are translucent, and the remaining 16 are opaque, stained glass windows decorated with gold. While most of the windows belong to the 18th or 19th centuries, 6 belong to the 15th century. The principal feature of the interior is, of course, the rock itself, which, unlike many Christian objects of veneration, is left uncovered. It is surrounded by a beautifully carved wooden balustrade, built by an Iabite king. To many, as they stand and look down on the ancient rock, its history comes to life. Abraham's intended sacrifice of Isaac, David's altar on the threshing floor, Solomon's Holy of Holies, and Muhammad's ascension to heaven. High over the rock is the beautiful dome in all its color and glory. The diameter of the dome is 65 feet, and the height is slightly over 100. Actually, there are 2 domes of wood, the outer one being covered with lead. Between the 2 domes, there's a layer of wool and hair which keeps the building cool. From the center of the dome hangs a chain. I have no specific reference or data to support this thought, but it seems that it might be related to their legend of the dome of the chain. It is said that in David's time a chain, suspended from heaven, was used in rendering judgments. If the chain were lowered enough so the accused could grasp it, he was innocent, and if not, he was guilty. Nearby is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. As one enters it from the large central door, his first impression is of spaciousness, light, and newness in a building of this age. Parts of the building date back to 1236 A.D. The sense of size, however, is not an illusion, for 5,000 people can worship here at one time. The mosque is 264 feet long by 181.5 feet wide. There are 7 aisles running north and south, 1 broad aisle, and 3 narrower ones on each side. 81 pillars and 33 piers support the ceiling of this massive building. Some are of marble and some are of rose-colored limestone. Each day as the hour of prayer draws near, Muslim worshipers can be seen in the act of ablution, preparing themselves for entrance into the mosque, where they will make their prayers to Allah. Well below the present ground floor and running parallel with the south wall of the city, we find the remains of what is believed to be the stables built by Solomon. Before continuing our journey through the Holy City, let us leave the city through the dung gate in the south wall. Here we see the modern wilderness. The hot, arid climate offers little refuge for vegetation or for any form of life. Yet, as can be seen on the terraced slopes, life does persist. For some 30 minutes, we wind our way along a narrow, twisting roadway and come upon a sight seen 2,000 years ago by 2 other weary travelers. The account is mentioned only in St. Luke, where we read, "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, for there was no room for them in the inn. This is Bethlehem, town of David, birthplace of Jesus. Although it is today surrounded by additions and extensions, this simple pile of stone is the Basilica of the Church of the Nativity, Christendom's earliest and best preserved church. The door of the church has been filled in 3 times. The original high square is marked by heavy stones and overhanging lintel. This was later filled into the traditional Arab arch. And finally, to prevent horses and cattle from entering, as well as unwanted guests, it was closed down to the low door, which significantly also requires a man to bend low when entering. Inside, beneath the choir of the church, is a rock-hewn cave where Christ was born. Today, the vault is sheathed in marble and hung with censers and votive lamps. Beneath the altar, a silver star is sunk into the marble floor, engraved with the words, "Here Jesus Christ was born of the Virgin Mary." We leave Jerusalem with little more than a glimpse into its history. The road between Bethlehem and Jerusalem in Jordan is a fairly new road built after the forming of the State of Israel. The old road, which is straight and separates the cities by a mere 10 minutes, is in Israel and no man's land, which separates the 2 countries. As we approach the city again, we pass one of the many minarets that tower over the flat-topped buildings of the Holy Land. Nearby, atop the Mount of Olives, is the Church of the Ascension, built over the spot where Christ is believed to have ascended to heaven. In the rock covered by the church appears the outline of a footprint, by legend, left by Christ when he ascended into heaven. And now we return to the city through the gates of St. Stephen in the east wall. It is here that the Way of the Cross, or the Via Dolorosa, begins. To our right stands a serene and peaceful Church of St. Anne of the Pool of Bethesda. The church is one of the best preserved examples of Crusader architecture. It's built on the foundation of a 5th century basilica that was erected over the place where Mary was born. However, the church was not completed until the 12th century. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel went out at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. And whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? And the impotent man answered him, "Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me." And Jesus saith unto him, "Rise, take up thy bed, and walk." And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed, and walked. And on the same day was a Sabbath. The area is now being so thoroughly excavated that it's difficult to get a clear idea of what it was like in Jesus' time. In time, however, this place where Jesus offended the Jews by healing the lame man on the Sabbath will be restored. And now we return to the street and follow the steps of Jesus on Good Friday along the Via Doloroso, our way of the cross. The events that occurred from Jesus' condemnation by Pilate to his burial in the tomb are symbolized by the stations of the cross. There are 14 of them, some based on words in the Bible and some on other evidence or tradition. This is the first station of the cross. Currently the courtyard of a government school. It is to be found by walking up a ramp about 100 yards beyond St. Anne's Church. Across the street, in what was then also part of the Antonio Fortress, are the places where Pilate washed his hands, released Barabbas, and turned Jesus over to be crucified with the words, "Behold the man," or esse homo. It was here also that the soldiers mocked him, clothed him in purple, and planted a crown of thorns on his head. This area, generally considered part of the second station of the cross, encloses the chapel of the condemnation and the basilica of the esse homo. It is reported only by St. John that Christ bore his own cross before that task was pressed upon Simon. Most religious historians think it probable, however, that he did attempt to carry the cross, but was physically unable to do so. This accounts for the third station being devoted to the corner just beyond the esse homo, where it is thought Christ fell under its weight. Because the Gospel relates that Mary, mother of Jesus, was present at the crucifixion, historians also think it likely that she was among the women of Jerusalem who, the Gospel says, followed the procession. This supposition led to the establishment of the fourth station as a place where Mary had an opportunity to break through the crowd and look compassionately upon her son. Close by the fourth station is a place where it is believed the cross was placed upon Simon to carry, at least part of the way, to the foot of Calvary. This is the fifth station. The story of a woman's having enough pity for Jesus to wipe his face with a cloth, which thereafter bore his imprint, has grown into the tradition of St. Veronica. Who the woman was or whether this event actually happened is a matter of belief. Since the name in Latin means true image, it is unlikely that the woman's name, whoever she might have been, was Veronica. In any event, it's a lovely story marked by the sixth station. The gate through which Jesus left the city to proceed to Golgotha, or Calvary, is supposed to have been the place where he fell for the second time. This is identified as the seventh station, up some steps beyond a wide vaulted arch. Outside the city walls of Jesus' time, but now just near the Lutheran hospice, is the 8th station. This is a place where, according to St. Luke, he turned to address the women who had been following him and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but for yourselves and for your children." The 9th station, where tradition says he fell for the 3rd time, is located at the entrance to a Coptic church, close to the entrance to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre itself. Before entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the remaining stations, turn back for a moment up the old cobbled street into the marketplace, and finally to the rooftop of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Here the marks of centuries of building, construction, destruction, and reconstruction can still be seen in the structure that stands today. Still in need of major repair, the front facade is currently shored up by iron scaffolding. Far below, men sit with mallet and chisel, cutting stones in the traditional method used by their forefathers to effect the necessary repairs. Although a final agreement on the restoration procedure has been reached between the various sects who control different portions of the church, the exterior and interior repairs work, which began in late 1962, will take another 4 years to complete. On the extreme left can be seen a column and partial arch constructed by the Crusaders 900 years ago. Returning once again to the entrance of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, we continue our journey along the way of the cross. The area just inside is at the foot of Calvary. To reach the summit of Calvary today, one climbs a flight of stairs to the place where Jesus was stripped of his garments and where the soldiers cast lots for his cloak. This chapel is the 10th station. On the summit itself are alders marking the 11th, 12th, and 13th stations of the cross. These represent, although they bear little relationship to what the scene must have been 2,000 years ago, nailing Christ to the cross, his death, and the sorrowing mother. To reach the tomb of Jesus, one descends another flight of stairs that leads past the stone of Unction, so called because it was undoubtedly near here that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus prepared Jesus' body for burial. Just beyond it is the entrance to the Angel Chapel, which has been built over the site of the tomb, and the place from which the stone was rolled away. Because the sepulchre is so small, only 3 or 4 people can kneel in prayer or stand in meditation by the simple marble slab over the cave tomb where Christ was buried, the 14th and final station. Every Friday, religious groups make this pilgrimage from the palace of Pilate to the tomb atop Calvary. At this last station, a sepulchre of the Virgin Mother stands as a sentinel before the tomb itself. Elsewhere, some 30 feet below the present church floor, recent excavations reveal the remains of a cross. Some believe it to be the one on which Christ was crucified. The shrine erected is called the Chapel of the Finding of the Cross. Despite the skepticism which the appearance of the church frequently raises, its historical authenticity as a place where the events of the first Good Friday and Easter took place have been reasonably well established. After the city's destruction in 70 AD and its rebuilding and expansion by Hadrian in 135, the Christians who continued to live there would not forget, nor let each succeeding generation of Christians forget, the exact place where the miracle of the resurrection took place. In extending the walls of the city, the Romans built pagan temples on the very sites in an attempt to blot out the memory of Christ. It was these facts, among others, that led Constantine to evacuate where he did, and which led to the discoveries that caused his mother, Queen Helena, to build the first basilica there in 335. Nearby, the Muslim Mosque of Omar stands as a reminder of the gracious gesture of the Caliph Omar, who, on being invited to make his own prayers to Mecca within the Holy Sepulchre, replied, "Were I to worship here, henceforth your temple would be claimed for Islam," and he stepped outside to pray. Here he later erected this mosque just at the corner of the Christian courtyard. The right side of the street is lined with shops designed to relieve tourists of their monetary burdens. Back through the narrow street of the marketplace, with its hanging poultry and lambs, fresh fruits and vegetables, dress shops, jewelry stores and souvenir counters, we retrace our steps along the Via Doloroso. Past the side of Pilate's Palace and the Church of St. Anne, to a place just outside the gates of St. Stephen in the east wall of the city. Here, looking southward, we see the Arch of the Golden Gate. The gate has been sealed and can no longer be used. It was through this gate, just beyond the tree, that Christ was led by his accusers to face Pilate. Along the wall can be seen graves of Muslims. Christians lie in the valley below, and the Jewish cemetery occupies the hill far to the left outside the picture. From a vantage point atop the wall, directly over the Golden Gate, we see the city of Silwan to the south. The hill on which Silwan is built is also known as the Mount of Scandal, or sometimes the Mount of Offense, because it was on this hill that Solomon, to house his pagan Moabite wives, built a temple to their god Shamus. Looking east from this same vantage point, we see the valley of the Kidron, the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Mount of Olives. The valley of the Kidron is thought by some to be the place where the Judgment Day will be held for Christians, Muslims, and Jews. The church near the roadway is the Church of Agony, or the Church of All Nations. To its rear up the hill is the Russian Cathedral of St. Mary Magdalene. The Garden of Gethsemane is to the left and adjoining the Church of Agony. At the top of the Mount of Olives stands the Church of the Ascension. A curious mixture of legend and history makes the monuments in the Kidron Valley interesting. They are called the tombs of Absalom, Jehoshaphat, St. James, and Zacharias, but it is highly unlikely that bodies bearing such names ever lay there. There is too much Greek and Egyptian influence in the architecture, and the names in Arabic all refer to pharaohs. According to some biblical historians, they might have been monuments erected by rich citizens whom Jesus chastised, saying, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, that build the sepulchres of the prophets." To the left is Absalom's pillar, which in Arabic means Pharaoh's tiara. Finally, we reach the Garden of Gethsemane, where an order of Franciscans tend the quiet gardens, where the hedges of rosemary divide the walks and flower beds. And here Jesus came on his last night to watch and pray. And when he was at the place, he said unto them, "Pray that ye enter not into temptation." And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, "Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow, and said unto them, Why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. And while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? And when they which were about him saw what would happen, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest, and cut off his right ear. And Jesus answered and said, Suffer ye thus far. And he touched his ear and healed him. And Jesus said unto the chief priests and the captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief, with swords and staves? When I was daily with you in the temple, ye stretched forth no hands against me. But this is your hour, and the power of darkness. And they carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him to their council, saying, Art thou the Christ? Tell us. And he said unto them, If I tell you, ye will not believe. And if I also ask you, ye will not answer me, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. And so he was condemned and led away to be crucified. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. And then shall I begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. And it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him. And the superscription of his accusation was written over, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews.